Good morning. Thank you for that introduction. I'm so tickled to be here. This is my first time in this kind of a format, so I'm going to ask for your understanding and patience before we ever even get started. It's such a joy and a privilege and a pleasure to be here. My name is Gayle Jordan, and I'm the Executive Director of Recovering from Religion, and I want to talk to you about that a little bit today. But first, I want to tell you a little bit different story. I want to tell you about my experience running for state senate in the state of Tennessee. And I promise it's a whole lot more interesting than that just sounded. I had run for this seat in 2016. And then when it became available again in 2018, I decided to run again. And before I say another word, let me just issue a little disclaimer. Both Recovering from Religion and Atheist Community of Austin are nonprofits. And the political views that I'm going to talk about today belong only to me. You know, lawyers, we got to get it all straight. As I said, I made a decision when this seat became available to run for office. And after I met with my family and friends, and we decided that, yes, this was a good time to run, I met with my dear friend who would become my campaign manager, and we decided that as long as we could run a campaign based on dignity and transparency and ethics and respect for our opponent, respect for the voters, and respect for the process, then we thought it would be a good time for us to be able to run. We have had a Republican supermajority in Tennessee for about 10 years, and our hands were going to be full with the issues that were facing all of us: education, healthcare, infrastructure. We are deeply into the opioid crisis, and so we knew we didn't have any time to spend being in the mud with anyone. I want to read you a few statistics. I'm just going to read these off. You listen quickly, and I'll read them quickly. This is statistics in the state of Tennessee. We are the 10th highest in poverty in the country. We have the 8th shortest lifespan. We're number 42 on the comprehensive ranking of quality of life. We are 15th from the bottom in education. We're the 9th lowest in per student spending. And we're the 3rd highest prescriber of opioids among all 50 states. In fact, there were more deaths in Tennessee due to the opioid crisis than there were in auto accidents across the whole state. Republican supermajority, 10 years. Now, I recognize what I'm going to ask you to do for the next slide, and I'm going to once again ask for your indulgence. I know you've seen enough campaign videos to last you more than many lifetimes, but I'm going to ask for one more minute of your time, because watching this campaign video will tell you more about the campaign we were running than anything I can say.
I've been a Rutherford County resident most of my adult life. I raised my 4 children on the hard work and fresh air of farm life, and they're all Tennessee public school graduates. I was a stay-at-home mom until my kids began to leave for college, when I returned to my long-held dream of attending law school, and I became a lawyer in 2015. When I'm asked how I would govern, I have a simple 3-question test. Is it rational? Does this legislation solve an identified problem in the state of Tennessee? Is it reasonable? Does this legislation make the very best use of your tax dollars and mine? And is it right? Does this legislation do the most good for the largest number of people with the least negative impact for the fewest number of people? My vision for District 14 provides health care for the working folks who need it while saving our rural hospitals, compensating our teachers with higher wages and tangible benefits while eliminating unnecessary student testing, and addressing our opioid addiction problem by destigmatizing treatment, holding the pharmaceutical industry accountable, and legalizing cannabis. My name is Gayle, and I'm asking for your vote on March 13th in the special election for District 14.
Radical, right? This is as plain and vanilla a Democratic campaign as you can get. It's health care, it's education, it's the usual things that we Democrats tend to run on. And when we released this video, the Tennessee Republican Party lost their damn minds. And so before we go any further, there's one more little piece of information that you need to know that will help explain why they lost their minds. I have been an out and open and visible and vocal atheist in my community for the last 10 years. So that is what they were so mad about. So we released the video, and then this started to happen. This gentleman thinks I'm this is the name of my talk, thinks I'm the most dangerous woman he's ever seen in his 40 years of politics. And I will tell you that this gentleman is the lieutenant governor of the state of Tennessee. The chairman of the Tennessee Republican Party issued a statement to our Democratic U.S. Senate candidate and our Democratic gubernatorial candidate to disclaim me from the party because of my anti-American views and my anti-Tennessee views. In spite of all this drama, in spite of all this gnashing of teeth and rending of garments, we continued to rise in popularity. We had volunteers beginning to stream into the office. We had donations coming in, doors knocked, telephone calls made. There was seemed to be no response to this Republican freakout. If you have been involved in politics at all, in the last few years, you know this piece of paper, this picture that's on the screen is a piece of paper. This is a direct mailer. You would think in our day and age of technology that these things would be a thing of the past, and you would be wrong. These are still used in campaigns. You'll find some in your mailboxes every time there's an election. And when we released our video and we started our campaigning, the Republicans got busy with these flyers. I will tell you that these things cost about $1 a voting household. So, and there were about 50,000 voting households in our district. And so every time one of these pops up on the screen, you can do the mental math in your head. This is $50,000 a hit, $50,000 a hit. You can also see my liberal kooky ideas, education, all that kind of thing. It's depends on whose definition of kooky ideas, I guess. And credit where credit is due. Kudos to the GOP bro who combined the crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy with the pussy hat. Very edgy move by the GOP. Our entire fundraising goal was, Our entire fundraising goal was $50,000, which we proudly met. But every time one of these flyers went out, it was to the tune of $50,000 apiece. Okay, now I need to tell you something about the next two slides. I am not terribly proud of the next two slides, but I'm not embarrassed enough to take them out of my talk. So do with that what you will. If you're going to run for office, and you're going to spend $50,000 to send 50,000 flyers to 50,000 households, do you think you can proofread them? Just me? Not a problem? And if you're going to spend the $50,000 to send the 50,000 flyers to 50,000 households, and you misspell the state in which you are going to take office, you are disqualified. Can I get an amen? Like I said, not real proud of him, but not taking him out of my talk either. In spite of all the ugliness and in spite of all the terrible flyers and my distorted face on things and the ugly things that they were saying, we continued to climb. We had more volunteers show up, more doors knocked, more telephone calls made. And I want to tell you that this election cycle was a special election. That means that it's not in the regular season. You know what that means. And usually when you run for office, you have as much as a year and a half. You may even know 2 years in advance that you're going to run for an office. In a special election, you have about 12 weeks from the time the election is announced until the election itself. So in this particular case, we didn't have time to do what's called a persuasion campaign. We weren't looking for people in the middle. We weren't looking to change people's minds. We were looking to activate our voters. And because of the nature of my non-belief being such an issue, in rural Tennessee, we didn't have the time to put into a persuasion campaign. So our effort was a get out the vote campaign. And as I told you, these flyers are 50,000 apiece. And I said our whole campaign goal was 50,000, which we met. And yet we sent 3 postcards to every voter in our district. Now, how did we do that? We connected with a grassroots campaign. There are people who live in safe blue areas that feel our pain. You all in Texas here feel my pain as we feel it in Tennessee. And there are people in districts, and of course the money matters, and of course they make donations to the campaign, but folks who want to do more have connected with a grassroots effort called Postcards to Voters. So we sent postcards to our voters, each and every one of which was bought and written and stamped and addressed and mailed by volunteers in safe blue areas that want to try to help out. So we got the same effect, only ours were handwritten and hand done. It was a real pleasure to be part of it. So shout out to Postcards to Voters. And the Republican flyers just kept coming. And then this happened. This one takes a little bit of a backstory. My election was in March of 2018. In December of 2017, I had the joy and the honor of marrying two dear friends of mine. We did it at a little winery in Middle Tennessee. It was a glorious day. And after the happy event, and of course with my friend's permission, I posted a picture on my public social media page, my public Facebook page. And in classic Gayle Jordan snark, I had to add the status, doing my part to destroy the fabric of American society, because I just had to. How could I not? And so, of course, I put that in there. The Republicans lifted the image, lifted the status, put it on a flyer, reproduced it, and sent it to the district. Now, what they didn't know is these two gentlemen are constituents in the district. And what they also didn't know is one of these gentlemen is an Air Force veteran, diagnosed, it won't surprise you, with combat-related PTSD from his service in Afghanistan. So picture with me, if you will, this honorable soldier walking to his mailbox on a sunny March morning. And he opens it, and he takes out the flyer, and he sees a picture of the happiest day of his life being mocked by the Tennessee Republican Party and mailed to thousands of his neighbors. I will say, Shane and Landon, my dear friends, did pursue legal action against the Tennessee Republican Party, and in the interest of their privacy, that's all I'll say about that, except anytime I ever give this talk, if I ever think that Shane and Landon are going to see it or hear it, I always say, thank you, Shane, for your service to our country, and thank you, Shane and Landon, both, for involuntarily having to sacrifice your privacy to the altar of bigotry in Tennessee. But in spite of this, and yet we continued to climb more volunteers, more door knocks, more calls, more endorsements, teachers, union members, senior adults, students, the list goes on. The primary had come and gone. I did not have a primary opponent. My Republican opponent had a primary opponent. So we didn't, when in a special election cycle, turnout is everything. You are the only game in town. You're the only ballot. You're the only election on the ballot. And so it's really important to get your folks out. Well, when you have a primary opponent, they have to go twice because they have to vote in the primary. They have to vote in the general. And my opponent, in his effort to run against his primary candidate, the turnout at the primary was pretty dismal. It was pretty low turnout, and he started to panic. And I think between the fact that the flyers, even the ugly flyer about my friend, didn't seem to be having the effect. We didn't have money for polling, but we had kind of an insider track, and we saw that we were polling ahead. And because of all those things combined, that's when my opponent and his campaign team made the decision to engage in some unethical and unconstitutional behavior. I'm not going to make you strain to read this whole thing, but let me just explain what it is. I'll just read you the first 5 words. Good afternoon, pastors and friends. So this is a letter sent to all of the churches in the district addressed to the pastors. And of course, it goes on to explain that there's a special election coming up. And then it goes on to describe me as the goat-sacrificing, Satan-worshiping, baby-eating heathen that I am. And then he gives his own credentials about how he's been a minister and how terrifying I am. And then we get to the money shot. And once again, I'm not going to make you strain to read this. We are asking for your help in getting your congregations, family, and friends out to vote for Shane. First Amendment much? Congress shall make no law. Does that sound familiar? Any of that sound familiar? So I want to say this. If you're relatively new to the secular movement, or even if you've been in the movement for a while, you may already know this. When you begin to press up against that wall of separation between church and state, you're going to draw some attention. You're going to draw some national attention from both sides. So, of course, that began to happen because this was this campaign was so much of an attack on my religious freedom and my religious liberty that the same day that I got retweeted by him, I got retweeted by this guy. This person, And it got even busier than that. We had a spot on NPR. We had an interview with USA Today. Obviously, we're on the Young Turks. This became a big event. And then came the day, with all this attention and all this going on, then came the day when the time-space continuum was completely torn asunder because, remember that I told you that my opponent had had a primary. His opponent in the primary was the Tea Party guy, who was farther right even than he was. And my opponent had run such a dirty and low and disgusting campaign, even against his opponent, that there came the day when this happened. I was endorsed by the Tennessee Tea Party. The Tennessee Tea Party endorsed the atheist, activist, woman, Democrat instead of the Republican. That just tells you a little bit about what that campaign was. We had resisted in the face of all that bigotry. We had resisted in the face of the attacks, the ugliness, the fearful and hateful rhetoric, the attack on religious liberty, the mocking of a soldier. And not one time did we violate our campaign promise that we were not going to participate in that. My opponent was a wealthy pharmacist, and there was a lot of bad information that I could have put out there. We could have painted him in a bad light, and that was not showing respect for the process or respect for the voters. But the letter to the pastors had found its mark. And if you don't think that those pastors immediately turned around and started preaching that message of fear and divisiveness from the pulpit, then I will tell you that you don't know religion and you don't know Tennessee. And you already know the end of the story because I wasn't introduced as a Tennessee state senator. But let's drill down to what really happened here. So as you take a look around you as part of the Atheist Community of Austin, you can see that the non-believing demographic is the fastest growing demographic in the nation, in Tennessee, and I checked, in Texas. You all tend to be young and diverse. Conversely, the church-attending population tends to be older and whiter. So let's drill down to what actually happened here. This Republican candidate targeted this group of senior adults with his message of the heathens are coming and the fear and the divisiveness. And he got these senior adults out to vote. He certainly did that. But after they voted, they went back into their homes and locked their doors, more isolated, more afraid, and more angry than they were before. And their children don't have health care, and their grandchildren don't have rural broadband in the elementary schools, and their neighbors get no relief from the opioid crisis through cannabis, and their hospitals are closing because they can't stay open without reimbursement. And do you know what have you heard the expression salt in the wound or adding insult to injury? After my opponent was elected, he was named the chaplain of the Senate because, of course, Tennessee has something called the chaplain of the Senate. And in the proclamation, when these things happen, there's this long proclamation that has all these reasons why they did this. And one of the reasons that he was named the chaplain of the Senate was, wait for it, I'm going to say it, his strong defense of religious freedom. I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter at all. This is my completely non-bitter face. Can you tell it's different from anything else? So what do we do with this? Quit? Not run? Keep our beliefs to ourselves? What do we do? I'd like to say that the end of this election was only the beginning of the story. And so I want to share with you the takeaways that I came away from this experience with. Number one, in March of 2018, thousands of Tennessee Democrats, Tennessee Christian Democrats, voted for the out and open and visible atheist. They not only voted, they donated, they campaigned for it, presumably because this is Tennessee after all, and even our Democrats are moderates, presumably at the risk of their social standing, presumably at the risk of being shunned at their churches. So I think that that's no small takeaway that thousands of Tennessee Democrats voted for an out and open atheist. Number two, we were able to add to both to the national to the state, and to the local conversation about atheists running for office. And that's a conversation that needs to happen over and over and over again, and we were able to participate in that. Number 3, how many times in these podcasts and in your community and in our meetings, how many times in the general public do you get to tell why you believe what you believe? Because the Tennessee Republicans did me the favor of making my non-belief an issue, and every newspaper interview, in every appearance, in every podcast, I was able to explain why I believe what I believe. I was able to tell them that both my life and my campaign are based on equal parts of compassion and reason, that my neighbor's well-being moves me to act, that their genuine suffering and their genuine joy motivates me to make my community a better place. I got to say it over and over and over again. Number 4, I think we're to 4. This is one of my personal favorites. At almost every appearance that we made, when you are campaigning for office and you speak during the pancake breakfast or the catfish supper or whatever the event is, you do your presentation and then folks want to come shake your hand and speak to you for a minute, and you're used to that and that's what happens. But at every one, toward the end of the meet and greet part, you would see somebody kind of hanging to the back. It was almost as if they were waiting to speak to you a little bit more privately. And I could see it coming. And they would come up to me and they would shake my hand and they would lean in and they would say, "I'm not a believer, but I can't be out. I'm not a believer, but I would lose my job. I'm not a believer, but my mom doesn't know." And it was over and over and over. It was one of the joys of the campaign. There was one event that we had that a young mother came. She had 2 little girls, one in each hand. They were in about 1st or 3rd grade, something like that. She's raising these children to be free thinkers, and she wanted them to shake the hand and have a picture made with what it means to be both a free thinker and a leader in your community. It's one of the highlights of the campaign for me. And the last, and maybe the most important, a trail was blazed. You saw in the video I have cattle, and when cattle go into a place and they make a trail, they lay down the grass. And I call what we did laying down the grass for the folks who come behind us, laying down the grass for the folks so that they know they have an avenue and a way to go. And while they're never going to be able to say again, this is the first time an atheist has run for state office in the state of Tennessee, they may be able to say for the first time that this is the first time an atheist has run for office in the state of Tennessee and won. So we circle all the way back. Am I the most dangerous woman in Tennessee? Well, it won't surprise you that I'm going to give you a very lawyerly answer, and that is it depends. It depends upon what you are afraid of. If you are afraid of a woman who will stand in front of many, many people and call out your bigoted and unethical and unconstitutional behavior, if you're afraid of a woman who will give a voice to the voiceless and speak for those who are disenfranchised and poor and sick and weak, if you are afraid of a woman who will stand on the traditional American secular values of truth, justice, tolerance, equality, inclusion, and religious liberty for all, then the answer to your question of whether or not I am the most dangerous woman in Tennessee is, you bet your sweet ass I am. Any questions? Thank you guys for participating in the story. I love telling the story. It was a wonderful experience. And I think we'll open it up to questions if you have anything you'd like to ask. Will I run again? The answer is most certainly I won't say I won't run again. Is that a convoluted answer? I am in the process of relocating from Tennessee out to where my kids are in the Pacific Northwest, and I expect a kind of a big move coming up. And so the only reason I won't run in Tennessee again is because I'm relocating. I will certainly consider running for office again. However, I meant what I said about I am moved to action by what my community needs. And if my running for office, if my community would benefit from that and I feel like I could make a difference, absolutely, positively I would. If being part of a staff or just making phone calls for somebody else who's running for office would help my community more, I'll do that. So it's less about wanting to be the legislator and everything that entails, and more about how How can I make my community a better place? And so when I get to my new place, wherever that may be, out in Oregon, I'll look around me and I'll see where it is I can best plug in to be able to make my community a better place. Other questions? Okay, I think we have one here, maybe. Somebody's on the microphone?
Hello?
I can hear you.
There we go. Okay. So you talked about, because there was a special election and you only had 12 weeks, that you didn't run a persuasion campaign. So if you had had more time and run a persuasion campaign in Tennessee, how would you have approached that gap with religious voters? How would you have approached, the bridge building aspect of running as an atheist in Tennessee?
That's such a good question. We spent a lot of time. I mentioned that I had run for this office in 2016, and I ran against a long-term incumbent, and no one even paid any attention to me. He didn't even send a flyer out because he was so well known. And but then when it started to happen in 2018, when this campaign started, and we started getting the religious liberty response, we made the decision. I had already made the decision. I'm an open and out an atheist, and not only am I just an out atheist, I'm proud of it. I worked hard to get here. I'm a formerly religious person, and it was a tremendous journey for me to get there. And yet I thought it was wise not to hide from it, but not to run on it. If I had to do it over again, or in answer to your question, if I had had more time, I think, and perhaps my advice for new people would be, to hell with that. Run on it. Because I meant what I said about this is what makes me run. This is what motivates me. I want my community to be a better place. Why does that move me? Well, because I'm a human being, and my neighbors are human beings. And we know from our evolutionary heritage, we know from seeing our communities, we all do better when we all do better. And if I have the ability, I have had so much privilege in my life, and if I have the ability and the time to be able to run for office, I have a responsibility. I didn't just get that for no reason. I may have worked hard for what I have. That's great. I went to law school. That's great. But if I don't do something with it to make my community better, to make it useful, to do the right things, then what good is it, and what good am I? So I think as hard as it is for the rural religious folks in my state of Tennessee, I think I would push it even harder on it. They're going to know it anyway. They know you're not a believer. And so instead of going through your 14 reasons why you don't believe in God, I think I would have emphasized more what moves me to act. This is just my motivation. And so I would probably do it that way. Another question?
Yes. So I just want to know, how can we support you and what you're doing? How can we help? How can we,
What a nice thing to say. What a wonderful, thoughtful question. I, of course, am out of the political movement for the moment, only because I'm moving. But I would encourage you. The Center for Inquiry has what is called the Free Thought Equality Fund, and that's a PAC that's able to they vet candidates who are running under the umbrella of religious liberty, religious freedom. If you can sign up for their emails, you'll get occasional emails about special elections, even city council elections that may affect you in your area, of someone who, while they don't have to be a non-believer, they support the separation of church and state. They support secular values, and they will keep you apprised of all of that. As far as for me personally, Eric, in the second part of this talk, we're going to talk about the work that I do at Recovering from Religion, and so I'll tell you exactly how you can help me with that. But right now, as I'm in political hiatus until I relocate, the best thing that we can do is to subscribe to the emails for the Free Thought Equality Fund. Any other questions? Okay, it sounds like we're ready to move on to the second part. So the next part of my talk is all about the work that I do at Recovering from Religion. I love this part. Recovering from Religion was founded 10 years ago by Dr. Dale Ray. I know he's been here. I know you guys love him. About 10 years ago, he saw the need for a space for people to unpack, so to speak, the baggage that sometimes accompanies leaving one's faith. In fact, our mission statement is that we provide hope, healing and support for folks who are struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief. It's that simple. So what started with a germ of an idea has now become the organization that we are now. And when I talk to folks about it, it's a little bit easier for me to explain it from this perspective. Recovering from religion looks to answer the question, how can we help? We have both professional help and peer support. And so professional help, we have the Secular Therapy Project, and it's exactly what it says. I'm not going to ask for a commitment, a show of hands, but let me describe a situation that some of you may have faced. You go in for therapy. You have found a therapist. You've looked kind of closely. There's no crosses on the walls. There's no Bible verses in the ads. You read the reviews maybe, trying to figure it out, and you get into your session, and you're into the second or third or fourth session. And all of a sudden you hear that you have a spiritual problem, that you need to find a good church community, that you need to hit your knees and get right with Jesus. And you had no idea that's what you were getting into, and now you're emotionally vested and you've got yourself a hot damn mess. The Secular Therapy Project, when therapists come to us, we do a thorough professional vetting of their background. We check everything. We have interviews. We have references. We check their website. We check their Yelp reviews. In talking to their references, we dig deep to ensure that these folks provide only evidence-based therapy. And once we are secure in that knowledge, they become part of our database. And then you as a client reach out and you say, I need a marriage and family counselor, or I need a social worker, or whatever your therapy needs are. You put in your location, you put in how far you're willing to travel from your location, and then the resources that are available to you in the way of secular therapists will pop up. And whenever I describe this, I always want people to reflect on, okay, well, why do we need that in the first place? Why can't a therapist just hang out a great old big sign out in front and says, I only provide evidence-based therapy. I'm a secular therapist. Here in Texas, what would happen if a therapist hangs out that sign? Absolutely. Half of their clientele are gone in an instant. And so we work very hard to protect the identity of our therapists. We, of course, work very hard to protect the identity of our clients, and we match them up so that they can make that connection and move on. That's our professional therapy. That's the Secular Therapy Project. On the peer support side, this is the one that's so exciting to me. We have a 24-hour telephone hotline. The number is 184. I doubt it. Really, that's the number. We have trained agents, peer support agents, standing by to take those phone calls. They are as moving as you think that they might be. We had that hotline for a year or so before we realized that we needed the ability. Sometimes people didn't even have the space to be able to carve out time for a telephone call or privacy for a telephone call. Their spouse might walk in, a coworker might walk in, a child was afraid a parent might walk in, and here they are on the phone with a I'm doubting my religion hotline. So we created an internet chat. We thought that would give them more options, which it did, but what else happened was our phone system was based on the U.S. phone system. And when we opened the internet chat, it opened it up to anyone internationally who has access to the internet. So we became a global organization in an instant, overnight. And so our trained agents are standing by for these chats. Sometimes these folks are really and truly, the only word for it is in crisis. Not only are they're having a crisis of their faith, they've got other things. They've worried about their job, they're worried about their family, and they need a little bit of help. Understand that we're peer support. So what we're providing them is a safe place for them to ask their questions without judgment. We're able to provide resources. Here's my thing that's bothering me. Well, here's a thought. Here's a website. Here's a book. Here's a podcast that addresses the issue that you're struggling with. In addition to that, we also, as I said, as every project that we've developed out of a need to continue to say, how can we help? Our trained agents are trained not to do a lot of self-disclosure. That surprises folks when they come in to volunteer. But that's because we want to keep our focus on our client. And yet, the clients felt like they want to talk to someone who has a shared experience. And some of our folks are in extremely religious, extremely isolated areas. So then we created our online community. So subsequent to a phone call or a chat, if we feel like the client can benefit, we invite them into our online community, and then they self-select which organizations, which sub-communities that they want to belong to. Might be LGBT, might be Baptist, might be Seventh-day Adventist, whatever it is, wherever you want to be. You can be a member of all of them if you want to. Whatever your little corner of the universe is, hop in there. And it's in there that you talk with people that are on a similar journey. Similarly situated folks, and there you get to share your story, and there you get to get advice, and there you get to hear, how was it when you came out to your parents? I'm in this mixed marriage. What do I do about it? Well, here's something that I've done. So in the online community is where those relationships really build. And then the last piece of our peer support is literal support groups, local support groups. When we have a dedicated volunteer who is willing to pull together a support group, we provide training. RFR underwrites the cost of the meetup page, and off they go. We keep a database of folks who have asked about support groups in that area, so the groups take on their own personality. Sometimes they meet once a week, sometimes they meet once a month, sometimes at a coffee shop, sometimes at a library, whatever it is that works for them. And once again, this is peer support. This is coming together and saying, I am broken. I am so afraid. I don't know what to do. I'm going to lose my whole community if I come out. I don't know what to do. And it's a group of folks who can give you some support, give you some encouragement, have a soft place for you to land. So our support groups are part of our peer support. And that's recovering from religion from sort of the 35,000 foot view. We're trying something new. I'm going to say this several times. Remember that what drives us is trying to answer the question, how can we help? Next weekend is our very first fall excursion. We're having a weekend, real-time, real space religion recovery retreat. It's in the mountains of North Carolina. It's in a retreat setting. It's if you have ever been to a religious church weekend retreat, it's all the good stuff and none of the bad. It's all the s'mores. It's all the singing. It's all the talking late into the night and none of the 47 verses of Kumbaya. So we're trying this as an experiment. We think that there's a need for this, for people to have that kind of a weekend getaway experience. And here's the thing. We have subtitled this fall excursion, Embrace Your Nature. And what we're trying to do with this natural setting, this retreat setting, weekend retreat, is to sort of make up for what oftentimes religion inserts itself and subverts our natural tendencies as human beings. In other words, it subverts our natural morality to care for one another because religion divides us. It subverts our approach to our sexuality because religion has so many rules about that. It subverts so much. And this is us trying to have folks to reconnect to what it means to be human, what it means to be fellow non-believers, what it means to reground yourself in what religion has subverted along the path. So that's this next weekend. We are completely looking forward to that event. If you would like to help subsidize, I'm going to put this commercial in real quick. If you'd like to help subsidize somebody going to that, there's a donate tab at the recoveringfromreligion.org website. You are welcome to participate in that. We have tried to make it as affordable as possible, having it in the retreat setting. We're doing the food ourselves. You can do that. This is a good time for me to mention also, Recovering from Religion is a 100% fully volunteer organization, from Daryl Ray, who's the founder and president of the board, to me as the executive director, to the newest trained volunteer. Most of us have come out of a religious experience, not all, but most of us. We provide training for our volunteers. If you would like to be part of the team, we'd love to have you. It won't surprise you to know that there's a little bit of a process for volunteering. You just simply visit the volunteer tab. Think about this for a second. If someone with not so good intentions tried to get into the inside of RFR, we have to be careful about that. So please be patient with this as you volunteer. There's going to be an interview. There's going to be references. We just want to make sure our folks are protected. So if you would like to join the team, this is as close to armchair activism as you can get. We don't require from our volunteers that they do a certain number of calls, a certain number of chats, or a certain number of hours. We don't have shifts. When you are sitting at your desk and you're answering your email and a chat pops up and you say, I've got 15 minutes or 10 minutes to be able to talk to someone, I can't say enough about how gratifying this experience is. I continue to take calls and chats, even as the executive director, even with the scores and scores of volunteers that we have. Number one, because we're always needing volunteers, and I'm needed, all hands on deck. And number two, it's because it keeps me grounded, and it reminds me of why we do what we do at Recovering from Religion. So my commercial is at recoveringfromreligion.org. Across the top, there's the volunteer tab, and there's the donate tab. You can take advantage of either of those. And remember, our resource tab is completely public. If you'll visit that, we are in a constant state of reviewing new resources, adding new resources. We're adding podcasts, we're adding community groups, we're adding books, we're adding websites. And so take a second to visit the resource tab if you'd like to see a little bit more about what we're able to provide. And sometimes during chats and phone calls, we're able to reference a particular resource to someone who needs that particular thing. So that's, as I said, that's the big view of Recovering from Religion. It's the most gratifying work I've ever done. I'm closing in on my 4th year as being the executive director, and not only are the volunteers the heart and soul of it, and I am so grateful to them, the work itself in this era, being the portal, the gateway for folks who come in fractured, come in broken, and in a crisis and in a panic. Sometimes they stay with us for a long time. We've had folks in our community for a couple of years since we've had the community groups. We've had folks coming to our support groups for a couple of years, but they're making progress and they're asking questions, and it's okay for them to ask questions, and it's okay for them to go at their pace. We are really, really careful. We are absolutely, positively not a deconversion line. That may happen to you, but it will happen to you on your own terms as you develop your critical thinking skills. We market ourselves to the believing community, as you would expect, and we zealously guard our reputation for not being a deconversion line. So we don't allow that. We don't allow our volunteers to do that. That is, religion does that, and we ain't playing that game. And what we want to do is foster and encourage your critical thinking. You think it through. You know what? If you come visit us and you walk away still a believer, that's okay. You expressed your doubts. You got some resources. You had a safe place to ask your questions. That's where you are. That's fine with us. So give it a thought. Give some time to whether or not this might be something that you'd like to do as a volunteer. Continue to support us as you can. Any questions about any of that?
So, what's the most frequent type of phone call that you usually get? Is there a certain
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And it's not going to surprise you after we think it through. So we know that there's a those of us who have been in religion before knows there's a lot of emotional heavy lifting that accompanies walking away from one's faith. However, that's not the number one reason that people reach out to us. We also have a lot of calls and chats about lingering fear of hell. You know we are rational about it. We get to the point where we discarded the belief, and yet the emotional part of it stays with us for years and years for some folks. So we oftentimes get folks who they self-identify as atheists. They're rocking their lives, and yet at night when they put their head on the pillow, those images that we were indoctrinated with when we were children come and surface. That's still not the number one reason that people reach out to us. The number one reason that people reach out both on the chat and on the phone is fractured relationships. Because that's the real part. The fact that your mom is not going to talk to you anymore, the fact that your marriage is at risk, the fact that your entire community is religious people, that's what's so troubling to people. And that's so valid. It's so legitimate, so that when we listen to those calls and we take those chats, we understand. Many of us have experienced it. There's no good way around it. We have to go through it. There's just no solution to that other than that's the nature of what religion does to people. That's what it teaches people to do with its apostate members. And so unfortunately, that's baked in. And so, but we certainly can provide some compassion and some empathy and some resources and make you part of our community so that you can talk to other people who can feel exactly what you're feeling. Really good question. Others?
Yes. How long has the Secular Therapy Project been up and running, and what can we do to encourage more therapists to join the project?
Oh, gosh, that was a fabulous question. How long has it been up and running? I think it's been about 8 years. It's been almost as long as Recovering from Religion has been in existence. I encourage you to help us on both ends. In other words, the more therapists we can get, we're about to hit a milestone number of therapists, and I'm not going to announce it yet. I'm going to wait, and we'll make a big announcement sometime in the days to come about a number of therapists that we have, but we're getting close to a significant number. If you have a therapist in your community, if you have a therapist in this community, encourage them to go through the application process. I will say ahead of time, I know it's lengthy and I know it's protracted. That's because we're trying to ensure the best care possible for our folks. And so I encourage you to let folks know about it on the therapy side, and then certainly let folks know about it on the client side when someone has a need. We even have a few therapists. If you put in your location and your needs, if we don't have a therapist in that area, we have a few therapists who are willing to do some long-distance counseling. That's kind of a special case, but we try to accommodate that the best we can. We also, as I said, protect the identity on both ends of it. We protect our therapists and we protect our clients. And that would be the thing that I would ask you to do. And so if you'll like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter or vice versa, whatever it was I said, and if you will retweet for us when we make our announcements about things, and retweet them and put it out that's a way to help us when you're not even a full-on volunteer or donor. There's ways to help us. So thank you for that question.
When I called, there was that song. Who wrote that? Like, that's the cutest thing ever. I love it.
Sometimes I call just to hear that song. That is Shelley Segal. You know her. You know who she is. She's in our free thinking community, and she wrote the Recovering from Religion theme song. If someone picks up, say, okay, well, hang up because I want to hear the song again. It's beautiful lyrics, it's beautiful music, and it is her beautiful voice. I am so glad that you mentioned that. I should say that more often, that is part of the process. And so, because sometimes you have to be on hold a minute because all of our agents are tied up with other clients. And so if you listen to that song, and it's so comforting because it's telling you that someone cares about the situation that you're in. So call and listen, and then talk to an agent if you'd like to do that. We also, any other questions as well. And I also want to mention, we have blogs. We have a blog, we have a podcast, we have a lot of things. Everything is at the website, recoveringfromreligion.org. So you can visit that and see what we have. And if you would like to submit for the blog, if you'd like to tell your story or a portion of your story, I think it's pretty straightforward. They'll tell you the word limit. They will help you with editing if you want to embed some links and that kind of thing. It's hosted at Patheos. It's called X Communications. And so and then listen to our podcast. I know we're all overcome with podcasts we have to listen to, but if you listen to the stories from Recovering from Religion's podcast, it will move you as well. It's wonderful stories about the progress that folks have made and their personal stories. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, are we out of time? Oh, perfect timing. Thank you all. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.